Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This is an unusual episode of Cut The Clutter. I will have Snehesh Alex Philip, who's our defense editor, join in with me. And this is to talk about a really interesting story that he's done, showing how India's defense exports have gone up. For years, India has been among the topmost military importers in the world. Very often, ThePrint, that is the Swedish think tank that does this bean counting, very often it lists India as number one. Sometimes it's Saudi Arabia and India is number two. Just the scale of Indian armed forces and the Indian imports are that high. So it is counterintuitive that India is also now becoming a significant defense exporter. How significant? I will tell you two things, but I will not tell the third. The first thing I will tell you is that over the last 10 years, India's defense exports have gone up 31x, 31 times, albeit beginning with a small base of 686 crores, or at that point about $110 million. That said, now the amount is high. So that's the first point. The second point is that this is rising year upon year. So last year, the growth was 32.5% over the previous year. That is year 2002, 2023 was 32.5% higher than the preceding year. In fact, if this rate of growth continues, then what was set as a target of $5 billion, which in 2020 was 35,000 crores, it will go up now because the value of dollar keeps changing. That target set in 2020 to be achieved in 2025 does not look unreal. In fact, if anything, it looks very possible, particularly with multiple wars going on and people needing, besides other things, besides hardware, etc., people also needing consumables like rockets, missiles, and simple artillery shells and bullets. Now we get Snehesh Alex Philip to join us. Snehesh, tell us what is inside the story. I have given some of the basic figures, the rate of increase, and the fact that we are now exporting to 90 countries. But I said there is one point that I am keeping back. Tell us that point.
Oh, that's a very surprising point also, because when I found out, I was myself surprised, is the fact that, while we are selling defense products to over 90 countries now, the biggest customer for Indian defense goods as of today is the US.
That's just a little above 50% of all our defense exports are to America. This is carrying coal to Newcastle, or ulte baans bareli ko, as we say in Hindi, taken to another extreme.
Bilkul, it's absolutely counterintuitive. That US has traditionally been known as the defense exporter. We've bought multiple systems from the US, and for US to turn out to be the biggest customer for Indian defense goods.
And what's the reason behind that?
Well, largely the reason is because of India's offset policy. So under deals that have been done in the past by the UPA and also by the Modi government, because of the offsets policy, the US has been, in a way, forced to source from India.
Obliged to set up production facilities or help set up production facilities.
Absolutely. For example, one of the biggest client is the Boeing. Now Boeing in 2016 had set up a joint venture called the Tata Boeing Aerospace Limited in Hyderabad. And this particular joint venture now makes the fuselages for the Apache helicopters. Now, for example, the Indian Army will get the 6 Apache helicopters. Now, the entire fuselage
the
of
Air Force has already got 22.
The Air Force already has the Apaches. The Army is getting the 6 of them. The fuselages of all the Army ones, not the Air Force ones, will be made in India. And it is now the sole provider of Apache fuselages across the world.
According to your story, this company is now making 8 Apache fuselages every month.
It has the capacity to make 8 Apache fuselages every month, but so far they've explored over 200 of these Apache fuselages.
Right.
And similarly, it's not just the Apaches. The Boeing is sourcing from multiple companies in India, various systems which small parts, components which make their way into their Chinooks, which make their way into their Super Hornets, which make their way into the F-15, various aircraft programs, and not just on the defense side, but also on the commercial or the civilian side of it.
Also, we are now making wings for fighter aircraft as well.
Yes, and that is again interesting because that is being done by the Boeing's rival, which is Lockheed Martin, which also incidentally has a tie-up with Tata, and this was a tie-up. This was a joint venture that was set up in the UP era, but now, for example, Lockheed Martin and Tata, this joint venture is the sole source for the empennages for the C-130 special transport aircraft or special mission aircraft that is used. So which means that any C-130 sold anywhere in the world, the empennages of that is made in India.
So empennage, I see it's spelled EMPENNAGES, but for non-specialists like all the rest of us, please explain what are empennages.
Well, the fuselage would mean the main structure of the aircraft or the helicopter, the aircraft without the wings, right? That's the mid structure that you see, and then the empennages are the tail section. So that's the empennages. So C-130J's fuselage is not made in India. The empennages are made in India.
Yeah, and that's a major project as well.
That's a major
Indian
project.
company is partners with both American rivals.
Absolutely, and that's again very interesting. Also, at the same time, there is also the S-92 helicopters. These helicopters are used by the US president, right? The presidential fleet, the US presidential fleet. So any future S-92 helicopter used anywhere in the world, including by the US president, the body of that helicopter is made exclusively in India by the same joint venture.
So next time the president, this one or whoever wins this election, and you see them taking off to go to Camp David, you should presume that if it's a new helicopter, the fuselage came from India, from an Indian manufacturing facility.
Absolutely. The cabin comes from India.
Yeah. So this Tata having a partnership with Boeing and Lockheed. It's a bit like somebody from outside would have partnership with Ambani and Adani in some area where they would both be competing. Although right now I don't see any such major area, but it would amount to that.
True, because while both of them are American companies, they are both in the aerospace sector and they are both competing.
Yeah, and Tatas have then one more with Airbus as well.
The Tatas also have a joint venture with the European rival of both Boeing and Boeing and Lockheed, which is Airbus. Now, under this joint venture, for the first time, a private company, that is the Tatas, is manufacturing the C-295 transport aircraft for the Indian Air Force in India, the final assembly line, right?
Basically, they'll be replacing the HS-748s.
They would be
replacing, flying forever.
Yeah, so they would be replacing that. Interestingly, what we are told is that once the orders for the Air Force is done, there are more orders which are supposed to come from the Coast Guard. There would be orders that will come in from the Navy as well as because of the maritime version, and possibly from the BSF. But then this particular joint venture can also cater to any orders that might come in from across the world.
Especially civilian orders.
Especially
because
civilian
it's a
orders.
dual-use system.
It's a dual-use aircraft.
You can customize it to either.
Yeah. And then you also the Tata also is now partnered with Airbus to set up a helicopter, the commercial helicopter wing in India, to manufacture that. So that particular joint venture, when it comes into place in the next 2 years, would cater not only just to the Indian demands, but will cater to a global demand.
So not just these components, you also talk about sniper rifles, I thought we were hunting for sniper rifles all over the world to
We are
import
still
them
hunting for sniper rifles.
and exporting them as well.
But an Indian company, it's a Bangalore-based company called Triple S Defense, which is exporting them.
But why isn't India buying from them?
Well, that's a $1 million question, and that's a question that even I often
That
ask.
might be a few $100 million worth of question.
Absolutely. But interestingly, is one of the companies that I mentioned is Tombow Imaging. Now, Tombow Imaging makes these specialized sight systems. Now, the story of the Tombow Imaging is also very interesting because it was somewhere in 2014 when the Indian Army had gone in for a joint exercise with the US, with the US Army in the US. And one officer from the Indian Army observed this lovely looking sight system that the Americans were using. So he wanted to know more about the sight systems, and that is when the American soldier officer turned to him and said, "Boss, dude, this is from India, made in India." And that is how Indian Army discovered this small company in Bangalore, which was already exporting items to the US, called Tombow Imaging. Now, of course, there are multiple products with Tombow Imaging, which is in use with the Indian Army. But and I think that answers your larger question on why is the Indian military not using some of these components yet, still scouting
So
for...
if you want to sell to Indian armed forces, first sell to American armed forces and make sure that Indians see those systems during their exercises.
Absolutely. Of course, this was said in a lighter vein.
Yes, this is in a light vein, but only in a semi-light vein.
Absolutely.
Only in a semi-light vein, because this is a serious issue as well. Now, you say bulletproof jackets, helmets. These are explosion-proof helmets. What do you call them? Or ballistic?
Yeah, ballistic helmets.
Helmets.
These are mostly been exported by a Kanpur-based company called MKU.
And that's a private company.
That's a private company again.
Yeah. And armored vehicles?
Armored vehicles, the Mahindras are into armored vehicles. Then you have the Kalyani Group, which is into armored vehicles. So the armored, not vehicles as a whole,
but parts.
But parts of it, the armor plating of it. But in future, in the coming years, I was speaking to the Scion of the Kalyani family earlier this year, and I did an interview with him. And he mentioned for the fact that, one of the key areas of where he sees India as a manufacturing hub is going to be armored vehicles and artillery guns. And these are the two areas that the Kalyani Group is investing heavily into.
So Kalyani Group, in fact, I had visited their headquarters in Pune to record a walk the talk interview with Baba Kalyani, the founder. We'll share a link with you with the description. Please do watch it. There are also pictures from that trip. I will try and find those pictures, and you can see those as well on your screen. Kalyani has also, if I may say so, use that expression, also probably has had the biggest of the big ticket export orders now. That is for artillery guns, because these are really large caliber guns.
Yes, and these guns were sold to Armenia. Interestingly, again, the Indian Army is still scouting for artillery, new generation artillery guns, but the Armenians have gone ahead and bought this from the Kalyani Group, and the Kalyani Group is already in talks with 2 to 3 other countries for the same guns.
Yeah, but they are also bidders for the Indian Army's orders.
Yes,
and we also have Larsen and Toubro and some others making artillery guns as well.
Yes.
So the artillery code seems to have been cracked, because for almost 40 years now, we've been living on Bofors guns. So
Yeah.
Bofors are being upgunned. Old
Bofors have been upgunned. Dhanush has come in. The attacks is there. The attacks is something again which is a joint. It's a unique product where both Kalyani Group as well as Tatas are involved. But the army is not really happy with the attacks for whatever reasons. The reasons have been mentioned in stories done in the past. Now they're looking for a new generation towed gun, for which the RFP has been sent out. Companies would start bidding.
Yeah. So Armenia, that's one big deal. And the other big deal is the continuing export of BrahMos missiles to Philippines.
Yeah. So the BrahMos deal with Philippines is a standalone deal, which is a huge defense export. So I would consider those two as one of the major defense exports.
So another company that you're talking about is Dynamatic Technologies. What are they doing, and for who?
Dynamatic Technologies does for multiple other organizations, including for Boeing. Now they make certain components and parts for Boeing, besides other companies. So there are not just Dynamatic Technologies which are there, which is a private company. There are multiple other
You mentioned
ecosystem.
you mentioned Russell, Texas, and
Yes.
Sasmos HET.
Yes. So these are one of the major suppliers for the Boeing products. But in terms of MSMEs, MEs that are in action, there are over 300 of such companies which are supplying to multiple foreign. But then these are all, in numbers wise, they should be small, because these are all components and
But they are
parts.
all developing capabilities.
Yes, they are all developing capabilities.
And then you have the larger public sector companies like BEL, Bharat Electronics, and HAL, good
Yeah.
old HAL. And HAL is making gun bay doors for FA-18
The Super
fighters,
Hornets.
Super Hornets, and Bharat Electronics Limited. That seems to be manufacturing some sensitive products. Tell us about that.
See, the BEL manufactures the IFF, that is the Identify Friend and Foe Combat Identification System, and Speed Secrecy Systems for the PATIs. Now, these systems are installed on the PATIs which are operated by the Indian Navy. Now, what happens is that in case if there is, let's say, an X country buys places an order for the PATIs, it has then the option of using what the Boeing offers, or going in for this system that the Indian Navy operates with. So that is also it's a significant step up, as you mentioned earlier, that the capabilities have been developed.
So PATI is a maritime reconnaissance aircraft, anti-submarine warfare, also carries sophisticated torpedoes and missiles as well. So it's a very versatile force multiplier, in fact, for any navy. Other interesting company you mentioned is something called Indo-MIM. So what is MIM? And this has a very interesting history.
Well, Indo-MIM was actually a surprise for me too. Just like how the US was a surprise for me, Indo-MIM was a surprise, because I would have expected that India's biggest defense exporter would be one of those big companies out there, Tata, Kalyani, Lazar and Tobo, Mahindras, Adani for that matter. But India's top private exporter, is actually this company called Indo-MIM. Now, what is Indo-MIM? Indo-MIM is a Bangalore-based company which does metal injection molding. That is the
MIM, yes.
MIM where it comes from. Now, you mentioned that it has a very interesting history. It indeed has, because the company's roots date back to 1997, right? When AF Technologies India was founded as a 50-50 joint venture with a North American MIM company called the Precision Cast Components, and by an Indo-American, for that matter, Dr.
Krishna Chivukula.
Yes, Dr. Krishna Chivukula. And in 2001, he took the 100% ownership of this company. And this is now making specialized components, tools, catering not just to the aerospace industries, but also to other industries, including automobile industry.
Which brings us to a fascinating company. So fascinating that for a moment I was also thrown as to what is this company. It's a public sector company, but it occurred to me that I had not heard of it. And I'm not sure many of you also might have. So just think about it. Do you know a company called Munitions India? That is the largest armament exporter now from India. It exported by itself worth 1,726 crores last year, ammunitions and explosives. And now its order book is running upwards of 6,000 crores. So what is Munitions India and where did it come from?
Well, Munitions India came into being in 2021 following the corporatization of the erstwhile Ordnance Factory Board. Now, Ordnance Factory Board consisted of these, manufacturing facilities, factories, that they were clubbed together based on their specialization and were divided into 7 entities, corporate entities. And Munitions India Limited was one such entity, which, as the name suggests, would makes a variety of rockets, including the Pinaka systems, artillery shells, other munitions and ammunitions for the Indian Army, Indian military for that matter.
So among the ammunition being sold, in fact, the hot selling item right now is also 155 mm artillery, because that seems to be the most in demand thing, and it's a consumable. So people buy it and burn it. So on any given day, Ukraine uses about 7 to 8,000 shells of this, and Russia about 3 times as much. And both are scouring the world markets, willing to buy up anything. Of course, India is not selling to either of them, but maybe others buy and make up for their stocks. In any case, there is demand for 155 shells, also for Armenia, other countries also.
So, as you earlier mentioned about the fact that now this particular company, Munitions India Limited, has an order book of about 6,000 crores, which have to be delivered over the next 3 years. So it's not some long-term contract which is there. And what do this company specialize in? This company specializes in rockets, artillery shells, including 150 shells. So which means that given how the global conflict is, there are multiple countries in the world who are beefing up, right? Beefing up its arsenal for itself and for whatever other purpose. And one of the key companies which is contributing to this is this Munitions India Limited. And now there are several other Indian private companies also which are now looking at striking deals when it comes to ammunitions and munitions.
Because if you see modern warfare now, it's mostly about long-range artillery and drones. And there also India has some strength, because I see some drone parts being exported, particularly to the Israelis.
The Israelis have joint ventures in India. One is with the Adani Group, and then it also has a tie-up with one of the Israeli aerospace industries. Tie-up. The Adani one is the Elbit, and then you of course have the Israeli aerospace industries with a tie-up with a different company, Kanpur-based company, in which they were initially sourcing the composite structures for the drones. Right? I can say for the fact that we had done this story about a year back, that in the Azerbaijan-Armenia war, many of the drones that were being used, the Israeli drones that were being used, both attack, suicidal kamikaze drones and otherwise, their structures came from India, So now the Israelis are, of course, sourcing this through the joint ventures, and also now certain technology, certain electronic items, certain site systems from India for their
So I think the best thing in this is just the beginning. But the best thing is that a defense ecosystem is being built, that a defense manufacturing and development ecosystem is being built. So I think there'll be lots of stories going ahead. Snehesh, you're going to be busy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.